Peace, all peace. So recently, I've come across a lot of conversation, a lot of chat back and forth about the trendy topic that is astrology, especially amongst the younger people, the younger generations. So I just wanted to chime in and break things down from my perspective. So when I see people discuss astrology, it's always very elementary. It's always about your sign or the sign of your friends or family, or the sign of an ex-girlfriend or an ex-boyfriend, or your horoscope for the day, the week, the month, the year, or birth charts. It's always geared towards smaller, insignificant details rather than the bigger picture, or society, or the world at large. But when you actually take the time to apply it on a larger scale, and when you really analyze astrology by way of the actual signs in themselves, and some of the symbols that represent said signs, then you can start to decipher things and ascertain some real meaning. Remember, you gotta bear in mind the fact that some of the greatest men of our time, of our recorded history, were big into astrology, so its importance is nothing to downplay. So to give you an example, I'm sure the majority of you are familiar with the name J.P. Morgan. If you aren't familiar, J.P. Morgan was a very notable American investment banker and essentially one of the main men or pioneers on Wall Street in the late 19th and early 20th century. So alongside all that success, he founded J.P. Morgan and Co., which, if it rings a bell, is now J.P. Morgan and Chase, the largest bank in the United States at the moment and the fifth largest bank in the world. To bring it back full circle, even a man as influential and as wealthy and successful as J.P. Morgan was quoted as saying that anyone can become a millionaire, but to become a billionaire, you need an astrologer, and that millionaires don't use astrology, the billionaires do. Now, why would J.P. Morgan say something like that if astrology wasn't serious, or didn't matter, or was irrelevant? I mean, he was obviously a billionaire himself at the time, so was this something that he was involved with or something that he was very knowledgeable of? I mean, it certainly begs the question. I wanted to bring a tangible example like this to the forefront just to show that I think astrology holds more weight and is far more important than the general population give it credit for. And not to go off on a tangent, but that's why there's always mention of the 1% with all the knowledge and all the power, and the rest of the 99%. Because we need to use discernment, we need to use critical thinking, and we need to look beyond the surface and ask better, more insightful questions and dig deeper and deeper into topics. It really shouldn't come as a surprise that the present day powers that be govern present day civilization and society using the calendar and astrology. For instance, do you guys really think it's a coincidence that the days of the week are named after or in honor of the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn? And if you know of or speak other languages like Spanish or French, for example, you would know that the days of the week and the planetary bodies I just named are in exact unison. And that's not a coincidence, that's not by accident. The way we measure and keep time in our civilizations and in our societies is literally tied to astrology, so there's no way that it's irrelevant or that it doesn't matter. And not to go off topic, but that's why you guys have to seriously look at the etymology and the prefix and suffixes of words in the English language, because that'll tell a lot. For example, the months of the year are sept, oct, nov, dec. That's 7, 8, 9, 10. So essentially that tells you that September, October, November, and December are supposed to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th month. But obviously January and February were added, which I don't necessarily agree with, because the calendar previous to the one we have now, March would be the first month of the calendar and essentially the new year, which makes sense because outdoors it would be spring, so things would be turning green, the weather would be getting nice, hence the new year. With the calendar we have now, obviously January is the first month in the new year, which doesn't really make sense considering it's in the dead of the winter, but that's a conversation for another day. Also, full disclaimer, I'm predominantly speaking for the West, so that's the United States, Canada, most if not all of the Americas, the United Kingdom, most if not all of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, nations like that. So I'm aware that China has their own separate new year, but obviously I don't live in China, so can't speak for that. So just to bring it back, it shows you that astrology isn't this new trendy topic that's come about as of late, but it's had a massive influence on our society and civilization, which is really based on and revolves around astrology if you really look at it, especially since we adopted the calendar we have today. So again, you got to remember how I mentioned that certain signs have certain symbols associated with said sign. So for example, Taurus is represented by a bull, Gemini is represented by twins, Cancer is represented by a 69. It looks literally like the number 69, etc. So I specifically noted these 3 signs because I will be describing how certain real world events and circumstances may have been orchestrated or carried out specifically in accordance with the astrological signs. So first things first, we're gonna discuss and break down the moon landing. So the moon landing first occurred in 1969, allegedly. Apollo 11 was the space launch, the American space launch that first landed humans on the moon. Now, keep in mind, Apollo 11 launched July 16th and landed on the moon July 20th. So, obviously, July 16th and July 20th are both dates under the astrological sign that is Cancer. And keep in mind, the year was 1969, and the astrological sign that is Cancer is often represented by the symbol 69. That looks like a 69. I'm sure you can all slowly but surely see where I'm going with this. So to tie it all together, if you know astrology, you know that each sign in the zodiac is ruled by a particular planetary body. So we mentioned that the moon landing happened during the time of Cancer in 1969, where the astrological sign of Cancer is represented and looks like a 69. So if you had to guess which planetary body ruled Cancer, which one would you guess? Of course, it's the moon. I mean, it's all rather self-explanatory, but this is just to paint the picture to illustrate the fact that astrology is not irrelevant, and it definitely coincides with many events that have gone on in real life. I mean, the moon landing could have happened in 1968 or in 1970, or instead of during the time of Cancer, it could have been in September or in January, but it's all too perfect. So again, I don't think it's a coincidence, and astrology definitely plays a big part in that. Next up, I wanted to discuss and break down Scottie Pippen and the 2021 death of his firstborn son, Antoine Pippen. Now, if you watch or know much of anything about NBA basketball and its well-recorded history, you would know that Scottie Pippen wore number 33 for the entirety of his NBA career. Not just where he was most successful with the Chicago Bulls, but also with the Portland Trail Blazers, I believe, and the Houston Rockets. Pippen gained notoriety, was at the height of his NBA career, and was his most successful, where he won 6 NBA championships playing alongside Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. The news of the death of his firstborn son broke on the first day of Taurus, whose astrological sign or symbol is represented by a bull. Not to add insult to injury, but his son passed away at 33 years of age, and Scottie Pippen again wore number 33 for the entirety of his NBA career. Just some food for thought, but that in combination with the Bulls and the Taurus connection, coincidence? Personally, I don't think so. And the last example here to shed light on how astrology and real life, real world events and situations coincide and tie in together is the infamous 2020 death of George Floyd. There are about 2 or 3 real intricate connections that tie in, so stay with me here. Now, if you can remember, George Floyd passed away in Minneapolis, Minnesota on May 25th, 2020, which is a date that falls under the astrological sign of Gemini. Next to Kobe Bryant's passing, which will all tie in here in a moment, his 2020 passing, alongside the aftermath and backlash that ensued as a result of the precarious situation, was arguably the biggest moment in a year filled with big moments. To be honest, 2020 was the most memorable year in recent memory. So again, to reiterate, I really want you guys to understand this and to really see what's going on, because this is ridiculous. George Floyd passed away in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which, if you guys know, is commonly referred to as the Twin Cities. As mentioned, Floyd passed away on May 25th, which is a date that falls under the astrological sign Gemini. And Gemini's astrological sign or symbol is represented as twins. To be honest, that in itself is certainly enough to make you raise an eyebrow. But oh wait, there's more. Obviously, we're all aware of what happened on that fateful day as Floyd fell victim to police brutality. And in that altercation with Minnesota PD, there were about 3 or 4 officers involved, and one of the officers' names was Thomas Lane. Now, if you can harken back to what I mentioned around the beginning of the video about etymology, the word Thomas means twin. So also, if you can recall, in the aftermath of that moment, former NBA player Steven Jackson came out and said that he was torn, he was devastated, he felt like he lost a brother, he felt like he lost a twin, because obviously they look quite alike. Many people on the internet mentioned how they were almost like twins, and this was a narrative that was voiced by a number of popular platforms, including ESPN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and USA Today, that all had stories mentioning how Steven Jackson was mourning his twin. And to top it off, like I mentioned previously, the 2 biggest deaths in the biggest year in recent memory, Kobe Bryant and George Floyd, both of their daughters had the same name, twin names, if you will, Gianna Bryant and Gianna Floyd. I mean, the twin symbolism here is insane, and again, to bring it back full circle, to tie it all together, it's all to shed light on the fact that astrology is nothing to downplay or make fun of or ignore or think that we're too cool to read into it or to get into it. It's like, I think astrology holds a lot more weight than even we know, and that even we give credit for. And the only way that we can get to a point where we gain more knowledge and we have more truth is by being open-minded, looking at all sorts of topics throughout life, taking part in different conversations, and digging deep into those topics and conversations. So stay safe and see you guys soon. Bless.